It's crazy to think that I was not diagnosed as autistic until the age of 25, but what's even crazier is that I'm not alone in this. Studies have found that up to 80% of autistic females are not diagnosed until after the age of 18, and we are so commonly missed that there are autistics everywhere trying to understand themselves more. So if you're one of those many people on their own autism journey now, then this could be the video for you. Let's talk about 5 things I wish I knew before getting my autism diagnosis 2 years ago. First, I wish I didn't believe the stereotypes about autism. When I used to think of somebody autistic, I would think of a 5-year-old boy who loves trains or gives you every fact about rocks. However, autism can look so differently for either girls or those that are late diagnosed, and our autism just seems to slip between the cracks. It's sad because unlike those stereotypes where maybe the autistic child is completely socially different or has really extreme meltdowns and their parents struggle to cope, the ones that get diagnosed later are usually the ones that learn to mask their autism. And instead of us actually getting the support that we need, we are given other labels like shy or clever, and the struggles that our families see are blamed on them things rather than the fact that we are in fact autistic. When I was first seeking out my own diagnosis, this made me so confused because stereotypes like not being able to make eye contact didn't apply to me. However, what I did in fact realise is that eye contact made me feel really uncomfortable, and I've always explained that as feeling as if somebody was staring into my soul when they were making eye contact, and I never knew what was socially appropriate. So if you are stuck in trying to understand your autistic traits, I think it's really important that instead of looking at whether you can literally do something like making eye contact or being able to make appropriate facial expressions, you think about how that thing makes you feel. And if you have to have a system in place in order to be able to do it, the likelihood is that is something that you struggle with. And linking to that, moving on to number 2, which is to do with imposter syndrome. Now, imposter syndrome is super common in those that realise they're autistic later in life. It's basically where you question whether you could be autistic at all and why people would have missed it if you were in fact autistic. This was definitely something that I struggled with, and even though I've spent my whole life knowing that there was something different about me, from struggling to make friends at school, never being able to keep them, constantly being in a state of burnout and having really rigid thinking, I still doubted every single day at the start of my journey whether I was autistic or whether I just got everything wrong. But when you think about the fact that you've spent your whole life pretending to be somebody else, this isn't really surprising that you feel this way, because it feels like a life raft and an explanation that you've been looking for forever, and you've been so used to doubting yourself or pretending to be somebody else that it kind of feels too good to be true that there is in fact a reason behind it. I don't know whether that even makes sense or whether anybody else experiences that way. Imposter syndrome is a really normal part of coming to accept that you are autistic, but my biggest tips for getting over that imposter syndrome is to do as much research as you possibly can about autism. One book that I read that completely cured my autistic imposter syndrome was a book by Sarah Hendricks called Girls and Women on the Autism Spectrum. I'll put a link to the book below for you. But honestly, Sarah's book involves interviewing autistic girls and women at different points in their life or about different points within their life, and asks them about loads of different subjects, from making friends when they were little to relationships to sensory issues, everything, motherhood, everything you could possibly think about within the autistic experience, all the way up to old age, she talks about. And when I read her book, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that that could be related to autism. Another thing as well that I've created is an autism diagnostic guide, which breaks down the full diagnostic criteria. I created that when I was starting my own autism journey, and basically created a spreadsheet of all of my different autistic traits within each part of the criteria. It also includes loads of helpful tips as well, so I will also link that below for you. But yeah, it's helped loads of people on their journey. But even if you don't do that, any research that you can possibly do about autism and understand how it can relate to your own personal struggles that made you question in the first place you could be autistic are going to be a huge help in you understanding yourself and coming to terms with it instead of constantly questioning whether you are even right. Moving on to point number 3, which is that an autism diagnosis isn't everything. Hear me out, okay? So when I got diagnosed, I thought that having this piece of paper would be life-changing. I would get loads of support now from the NHS. Everybody would treat me differently because they understood that I was autistic from work or even within healthcare. But that definitely was not the case. Basically what happened was I got my diagnosis of being autistic and that was it. I had my report through via email. I also got basically like a piece of paper or a certificate confirming that I had a diagnosis of autism. But apart from that, I didn't have any follow-up calls. I didn't have any follow-up support. And when I even told the GP, they were just like, okay. So there is huge importance in getting a diagnosis, don't get me wrong, but that importance comes from the fact that you understand yourself more and you finally have understanding. But if you are suddenly expecting to get this huge amount of support post-diagnosis, then probably that is not going to be the case, especially if you're in the UK like me. I don't say this to be negative, but also as a bit of reassurance if you are somewhere like the US or where it's really expensive to get an autism diagnosis, or even if you're in the UK and you have got really long wait time, that diagnosis is not the be all and end all. It is more important that you learn to understand yourself as much as possible than it is to get a formal diagnosis, unless you need it, for example, to get workplace accommodations or you're trying to get financial support. Outside of those things, the biggest part of getting a diagnosis is the fact that you have that understanding of yourself, but you don't need that diagnosis in order to understand yourself. Is everybody keeping up with this? Because I don't know whether this is making sense, but yeah. Anyway, number 4, what does unmasking actually mean? So I wish somebody had explained this to me, but it took at least a year and a half post-diagnosis for me to actually click with what this truly meant. When I first heard the term autistic masking, I took it literally and thought of it as actually putting a mask onto your face. But all this did was confuse me because I was trying to take this physical mask off and it just made me question everything about myself. Do I really love my partner? Am I really doing the right things in my life? Do I actually like the things that I think that I like? It just created this huge spiral and basically an identity crisis. But all you need to do is look at unmasking as meeting your own needs, because all autistic masking is putting the needs of other people above yourself. You make eye contact even though you hate it in an attempt to make other people feel comfortable. You don't talk about your special interests because you don't want other people to think that you're selfish, and you say yes to everything and become a people pleaser because you don't want to inconvenience anybody else. But the reality is all that is doing is inconveniencing you, and the people who truly love you and the people who truly care about you will actually love you whether you say yes or not, whether you make eye contact or not. And honestly, it'll probably make your relationships with people better. The more you meet your own needs as an autistic person, the more you will actually unmask, because you'll finally be accepting that your needs are worthy and other people are more important than you. I've actually found that my relationships with people since unmasking and meeting my own needs have become a lot more authentic, because rather than me just doing things to make them happy, I've been able to be open with them about how I truly feel. One really good example of this is that rather than me going on a night out anymore, like I don't drink alcohol whatsoever because I was using that as a mask, I now meet up with family or friends at a meal, or we'll go shopping, or we'll even just come round to my house and watch a film. And rather than me spending them social interactions completely exhausted and overwhelmed, I'm now actually able to have proper conversations with them or talk to them about things that mean a lot to me, rather than just putting myself into a little tiny box. And it's also men that I know who is truly my friend and who I can truly rely on, because the people that I was trying to put myself in the box for were the people who didn't like the true me anyway. If you are watching this video as well, guys, I would absolutely love it if you subscribe, because I post videos every single week talking about autism. So if you've learned anything new today before I get on to the final point, then definitely hit that subscribe button, because my whole channel is dedicated to talking about autism. Okay, Finally, number 5, I wish I knew that getting an autism diagnosis would actually change my life and it would change it for the better. I always compare this to a car. If a car stops working or you can't get it to start or it keeps breaking down, the first thing you are going to do is to take it to the garage so that a mechanic can look at it and actually understand what's wrong. And if we would do that for a car, why wouldn't we do it for ourselves when our own mental health and physical health is relying on it so much? If you've ever been in autistic burnout or any state of burnout, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here, because you probably spent your whole life holding yourself to neurotypical expectations of how you should be acting or neurotypical expectations of productivity, when the reality is you are not neurotypical, so you should not be doing that. The more I've unmasked my autism, the more that I've actually met my needs, the more that I've understood what my needs were in the first place, the more my life has actually improved. And I just feel like almost 2 years post-diagnosis, I now interact with the world from an autistic perspective and do everything with the knowledge that I am in fact autistic, and nothing can change that. But the thing that can change is the way that I approach the world, like making sure that I meet my sensory needs, make accommodations for myself, have rest days and actually let myself rest rather than feeling guilty for it. And the more that you do all of these things, the better your life is going to become post-diagnosis or post-realising that you are in fact autistic. Things can get better, and I really hope that by watching this video it makes you realise that that is true, because I definitely wouldn't have thought 2 years ago how good my life could look now if it wasn't for the fact that I had been diagnosed as autistic. I wish you the best of luck on your autism journey, and I will see you next week with another video about autism. Bye!